Japan built the greatest economic machine, and it will end up trapping its own people forever. Imagine waiting 34 years just to break even. Not on a bad bet, not on a failed startup, on the entire stock market of one of the richest countries in the world. Japan did that. And the craziest part is not how it fell. The craziest part is that nobody turned the machine off. Let us go back to 1945. Japan just lost the worst war in its history. 2 atomic bombs. Dozens of cities burned to the ground. The economy was completely destroyed. People were surviving on less than 1,000 calories a day. The country was under American military occupation. Most countries never come back from something like that. Japan did not just come back. It built something the world had never seen before.
Within 10 years, the factories were running again. Within 20 years, Japan became the second largest economy in the world. It overtook France, then the United Kingdom, then West Germany. One by one, like a chess player who had been planning every move since the beginning. How did they do it? Simple. They outworked everyone.
Japanese workers put in more hours than almost any other developed nation. Companies had a philosophy called Kaizen, which means constant improvement every single day, forever. No excuses. The government and big corporations worked together like a team with one goal: grow, export, dominate. By the 1970s, Sony, Toyota, Honda, Canon, these were not just companies. They were proof that an entire nation had decided to rebuild itself through sheer hard work. The world was impressed. Japan even had a word for employees who worked themselves to death. They called it Karoshi. A man could literally die at his desk from exhaustion, and Japan would put it on the death certificate, hold a ceremony, and keep going. They called it a miracle. They should have called it a warning. By the 1980s, Japan was not just powerful. It was terrifying to everyone else. American politicians held press conferences smashing Japanese electronics with sledgehammers. Books about Japan taking over the world became bestsellers. And honestly, people were not wrong to be scared. Japanese companies bought Rockefeller Center in New York City for $846 million. They bought the famous Pebble Beach golf course in California. They were buying Hollywood studios, luxury hotels, and skyscrapers across America. The Japanese stock market went completely insane.
Between 1985 and 1989, it tripled in value. Tripled in just 4 years. A $1,000 investment turned into $3,000 before you knew what happened. Real estate got even crazier. At the peak of the bubble, the land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, which is basically a park with a moat in the middle of the city, was worth more than all the real estate in the entire state of California. All of California. For a park. Banks were lending money like it would never run out. People borrowed to buy stocks. Stocks went up. They used those stocks to borrow more money, to buy more stocks. Stocks went up again. Round and round, higher and higher. Beautiful. Perfect. Unstoppable. And completely catastrophically unsustainable. The whole system rested on one single belief: that growth would go on forever, that prices would always go up, that tomorrow would always be better than today. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. December 29th, 1989. The Japanese stock market closes at its highest point in history. Bonuses are being handed out. Parties are happening across Tokyo. Japan is at the top of the world. Then, the central bank raised interest rates, 5 times in less than 1 year. And the dream started dying. Not in a sudden crash, not in one dramatic moment. Something much slower and much worse. A quiet, polite, unstoppable collapse that would take decades to fully reveal itself. Within 3 years, the stock market had lost 60% of its value. $3 trillion. Gone. Not moved somewhere else, just gone.
evaporated from savings accounts and pension funds and retirement plans of millions of ordinary people. Real estate followed. Property prices in Japan's biggest cities fell 84% from peak to bottom. A building worth $10 million became worth $1.6 million, while the $10 million loan stayed exactly where it was. Banks were drowning in debt. Companies were technically bankrupt. The whole financial system should have collapsed and started over. But Japan could not let that happen, because that would be embarrassing. So instead, banks kept lending money to companies that could not pay them back. The government kept interest rates near zero, so the debt would not crush everyone immediately. No one went bankrupt. No one restructured. No one admitted the machine was broken. They just kept it running. On life support. For 30 years. Now forget the numbers for a moment. Let us talk about real people. The lost generation. That is what they are called. The Japanese people who graduated in the 1990s and 2000s and entered an economy that had nothing to offer them. No permanent jobs, no career paths, no future that looked anything like what their parents had. They became what Japan calls freeders, drifting from one part-time job to the next, always temporary, always on the outside of a system that was designed for someone else. Many of them are in their 40s and 50s now. They never fully recovered. Lower income, lower savings, lower everything. A generation that did everything right and was handed the bill for a party that ended before they arrived. Then there are the Hikikomori. More than 1.5 million people in Japan, mostly young men, who have completely withdrawn from society. They do not go to work. They do not go outside. Some have not left their bedrooms in months. Some for years. The Japanese government does not just have a word for them. They have a census category. A special cabinet task force dedicated to this problem. That is how many there are. And then the number that makes everything else look small. Japan's population peaked at 128 million people around 2008. It has been falling every single year since then. The birth rate is 1.2 children per woman. You need 2.1 just to keep the population stable. 29% of Japan's people are over 65. The highest proportion of elderly citizens of any country on Earth. By the year 2100, Japan's population is projected to shrink to around 60 million people, half of what it is today. So who pays for the pensions? Who maintains the roads and bridges? Who takes care of the elderly? Who pays back the debt? The young people. Except there are not enough young people. And the ones who exist are already exhausted, underpaid, and quietly giving up on the whole system. Young Japanese men have been given the nickname herbivores, gentle, calm, not interested in the old script of working 80 hours a week climbing the corporate ladder, getting married, having children, sacrificing everything for the machine. People call it laziness. It is not laziness. It is math. They watched their parents work themselves into the ground for a system that then collapsed. They graduated into an economy that gave them part-time contracts and shared apartments. Now they are being asked to financially support a retired population twice their size on wages that have not meaningfully grown in 30 years. Meanwhile, Japan's solution has been to borrow more money. The national debt is now over 260% of the country's entire annual economic output. That is the highest debt ratio of any developed nation on Earth. Greece triggered a global panic at 180%. Japan quietly sailed past that while the world was looking elsewhere. The Bank of Japan now owns roughly half of all government bonds in existence. It also owns a huge chunk of the stock market. The central bank is holding up the entire financial system with money it prints itself. Not because it is strong, because stopping would be worse than continuing. And here is the final twist. In early 2024, after 34 years, the Japanese stock market finally crossed its 1989 peak.
Financial news called it a triumph, a historic recovery. Recovery. After 34 years. If you had invested in Japanese stocks at the very peak in December 1989 and held on through everything, every crash, every lost decade, every crisis, you would have, in 2024, just barely broken even. Someone who put the same money in the American stock market that same December would be up over 2,000%. Japan built the greatest economic machine the modern world had ever seen. Disciplined, hardworking, relentless. A nation that turned total destruction into the second largest economy on Earth through nothing but collective willpower. And then the machine kept running, past the point where it made sense, past the point where it was healthy, past the point where anyone could figure out how to stop it without everything falling apart. The young people of Japan are not lazy. They are not broken. They are the first generation to truly see the machine for what it is, to see what it actually costs in years and health and children never born and lives quietly put on hold, and to ask a question that no economic textbook has ever been designed to answer. What exactly are we building all of this for? Maybe the most dangerous thing any society can create is a system so perfectly built for one purpose that it forgets to ask whether that purpose was ever worth it. Japan has not answered that question yet, and honestly, neither has anyone else.